the Russians and the Europeans will come, you will see it, because this is just lungs for them. So it's very important that to have a big country like Russia integrated in this project, and that would add a lot to Egypt's economy and to the relations between Russia and Egypt.
Indeed. Turning to other, yes, let's
well, again,
speak about military relations.
The people should know that, you know, people think that our military relations are cut, or we didn't have any cooperation in this regard. No, it's not true. It was a regular type of cooperation. In other words, it is within a framework of certain dimensions that both parties understood, under the international circumstances within which this cooperation is taking place. You know, there was, you know, a kind of, I would say, ordinary cooperation, but it's not an open market for that. I mean, there were certain conditions that, you know, both parties understood, and on the basis of this, they continued this cooperation.
Yes,
now it's different.
But it was, or it has never since during the past decades reached at least the minimal of how it was during the Soviet era.
Of course. Of course. You know, when I referred to certain circumstances, the whole situation is different. Our quality of relations has become different with different parties, including the United States. So, but what I want to stress here, that there was always military cooperation, and we highly appreciate, you know, the Russian equipments. And by the way, 50% or more of the Egyptian armaments are Russian. So, but now the situation with the kind of freedom or the liberation of the national decision in Egypt, we act and we feel free because we took the very important step, you know. So I think the military will be expanded, and I'm not excluding the possibility that the Russians could have a joint venture, you know, for producing certain types of weapons.
We'll just speak about an announcement by the Russian media of that they were both close to signing a $3 billion deal for Moscow to supply missiles and warplanes, including MiG-29 fighters and attack helicopters. That's to start with. Turning to another important file, which is terrorism. And terrorism is a real threat to the whole region. President Sisi has just warned the whole world that if they have been reluctant in their combating such a phenomena, it would turn even on them, and it would hit even the core of Europe.
I'll start from 30th of June again to understand how this big problem is bringing Egypt and Russia together in this area. I think my reading of the strong support of Putin, unlike the timid support in January, was that they considered that removing the Muslim Brothers from power was a victory even for them, because they know the danger of political Islam. And this is for them a real threat, because, you know, they have 25 million Muslims, non-Russian, and they had suffered, and there is a built-in danger of political Islam, and for them fundamentalism is not only a dangerous phenomena, but fundamentalism would encourage for separation, independence, you know, so on and so forth. A danger that Russia cannot afford, that to disintegrate even further. So for them it's you know, their strong support in 30th of June was primarily, in my view, is because the Muslim Brothers are gone. By the way, they were 11 years ahead of us in classifying the Muslim Brothers as a terrorist organization. In 2004, the Supreme Court issued a rule that that the Muslim Brothers is a terrorist organization. So they know, they are good readers of history, and they know what it means to have Muslim Brothers in power and what it means to remove them from power. So, and they see that they understand very well that this phenomena is different in all by all means, and as we have just said. And just to add another argument to how important for them, even their position vis-a-vis Russia. I think big part of it is their fear that in the aftermath of the supposedly removing Bashar's regime, that Russia will fall in the hands of terrorists. And that would increase the danger. The Middle East is not far geographically even from Russia. So they understand what Egypt is confronting. They understand the kind of sacrifices Egypt is suffering from. And they understand that this is not an Egyptian war. It is a universal role. It's not only even not a regional, it is a universal role. And Russia has big interests in the region, and if you look at what's happening in the region, the map is so gloomy, and they are so concerned about this continuous deterioration. Look at what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Libya, Syria, Iraq. I mean, the region is disintegrating, and it is Egypt that is standing on its feet, right, and supported by a regime which is supported by its people, and still fighting terrorism, and even undertaking dramatic economic steps in order to have the economic wheel running and progressing. So there is quite a political chemistry I see that is happening between the two countries and the two leaders, and I expect that their cooperation will be intensified, because there is intelligence cooperation, which is normal. But I think it will be diversified in different areas that go beyond exchanging information to another areas.
And that takes me to regional file. And regional file, it is very well known that Egypt and Russia agree on all different aspects that is running in the area, except for their position with Syria, which we are not very much deep into it. I mean, we didn't want really to interfere in the Syrian domestic affairs. But anyway, the regional files in front of the two leaders when they start to speak about.
All right, let me tell you how I think the Russians are considering for the region. And I'll get to it, the point you just made. If you look at the different developments, you'll find there is a descending and ascending roles. There are new players. The non-state actors are playing a major role in the region. You have now parties equipped with arms, and they affect decisions of countries. And Daesh itself is a non-state actor. So Russia is seeing this situation, and in its back mind that the United States will soon move its strategic presence from the Middle East to Asia and the Pacific, what we call Asian pivot. That they have taken a strategic decision to move their presence, not to leave, but to lighten their presence in the Middle East, and move their basic strategic presence to Asia in order to encounter the increasing, inflating effect of China, economically, commercially, and militarily. But in order to do that, the Americans, of course, would be very much interested to see their interests are covered, and that they will not suffer setbacks. So there are a lot of movements. But now Russia with its coming back in a way through the Egyptian door, is something for them extremely important. You know, in order to have an impact in the region, you have to have come hand in hand with a heavyweight country, and they know that the heaviest in the country is Egypt. If you look at the region, even the file of Syria, maybe you have some differences on the details, but if you look at the line of thought, first, that we strongly opposed any military action against Syria, and we both believe that, you know, the political settlement is the only option that we have to deal with. And if you remember, at the time that the United States was preparing to launch a military strike against Syria, Egypt opposed this, in spite of the fact that, you know, a number of Gulf countries were supporting very much that a military action. So, and Russia adopted the same. The second line of thought is that you are trying to get the opposition, the real opposition, not the so-called opposition, you know, in one go. So that the Russians had the opposition's meeting in Moscow, and last week we had the opposition meeting in Cairo. So the line of thought is consistent. So that would strengthen the front of the political settlement approach, and maybe if a certain mutual understanding between Russia and Moscow would encourage the opposition, the Syrian opposition, in order to dispense with their differences and trying to unite in order to start the road for peaceful settlement.
The same position was taken by Egypt and Russia in Libya. So it's not the first time. Russia, even at the time the NATO wanted to hit Libya, they were opposing such an interference.
Well, this is very, you know, I think for the Russians, they feel that they were betrayed, because, you know, in the Security Council resolution 1973, you know, it was formulated to protect the civilians, all right? And Russia reluctantly abstained, not abstained. That's why it passed to the Security Council. But afterward, it turned that, you know, the intervention has gone far beyond the contents of the resolution. That's why I think they feel that they were betrayed, and they understand that what's happening is an outproduct of this the NATO intervention. But they appreciate as well the direct threat. What's happening in Libya is affecting Egypt, and that's why I think they are very close in understanding the situation there.
I have to end up here my episode, but before we just end up the whole discussion, from your point of view, do you think that this visit by the president, by the Russian president, and this new relation between Russia and Egypt would initiate a kind of narrowing any kind of gaps between other Arab countries and Russia?
Yes. In fact, we have seen the indications of this, you know, between Russia and the Gulf and Egypt. And that was, you know, because the American position in criticism of 30th of June was opposite to the Gulf and the Russians. And that's why the signals of closer relationship is there.
Have to end up right now because they're just telling me. Ambassador Raouf Saad, Egyptian former ambassador to Russia, of course, head of the EU bureau at the Foreign Ministry, and former assistant foreign minister. Thank you very much for joining us.